Okay, welcome back. Today, we're going to look into a question that I often get asked, and it usually goes something like this. I know it's time to raise my rates, but how do I let my existing clients know? I'm worried that my clients aren't going to want to continue with me if I raise my rates. Now, this can be a tricky one if you don't know how to share about the change in rates in aligned ways. And as always, with everything that we do here on the podcast, there is an outer job to this, to letting people know about your rate change, and there's an inner job to this. So let's dive in right away because today's episode is going to be a juicy one where you're going to get some important tips for how to communicate your raised rates with your clients. And also, this is going to be an episode where you learn a little bit about yourself as well. Now, before we go any further, I want you to know this. There are ethical and effective and loving ways to raise your rates and to have your clients continue with you. I pinky promise you this. I have done this many times over, and it doesn't have to be a scary thing or a stressful thing or an anxious thing or a dreaded thing. It can really be a beautiful experience, and one in which you grow and maybe even your client grows. Now, before we get to exactly what to say to a client when you're raising your rates, I want us first to start with what's going on inside of you when you think about talking with your clients about raising rates. Because as we often say here on this podcast, and also as I really lovingly hammer into my Sacred Depth students until they embody it, is this following truth: energy follows energy. If you've been listening to the podcast, you have heard me say this before. Energy follows energy. And if your energy is off when it comes to sharing with your clients about your rate increase, then you can say the best words in the world, but they're not going to land in the ways that you want them to land. Energy always speaks louder than words. So we first want to get clear on what are the fears or the beliefs that are activated for you when you think about raising your rates and then sharing this with existing clients. So, for example, are you worried that if you raise your rates, your clients are going to get mad or angry? Are you worried that if you raise your rates, your clients might get insulted or they might feel even betrayed? Are you worried that when you share about raising your rates with clients, that they might think you're too greedy or that you're being unfair or that you're way too much of a capitalist or that you're taking advantage of them? Maybe you're a little concerned that when you share about raising your rates, your clients aren't going to think that this new amount of money is worth it, that they're going to think that the work with you just is not that valuable. Maybe for you, your concern is that when you tell your clients that you're raising your rates, that they're going to immediately say no because it's out of their price range. And then that's it. You've lost that client. Maybe for you, there's a pervasive sense of guilt about raising rates. Or maybe it's something else. What is it for you? What are the fears, beliefs, we can call them misaligned energetics that come up for you when you think about speaking with your clients about raising your rates? And maybe even as you're listening to this podcast episode right now, you're realizing that you haven't yet even for real considered raising your rates because of one of the reasons I've shared or another. So, what is it for you? Now, whatever it is, first of all, I want to normalize this. All of these reasons, these fears, these worries, these concerns, these beliefs that I just shared, they are all very, very normal. Especially these kind of concerns can come up for thoughtful, ethical practitioners when they're ready to raise their rates. And I know if you're listening to this podcast, if you've made it this far, if you are into, what I've been sharing, then you are a thoughtful, ethical practitioner. So I want to just normalize this for you. And I'll share with you that I have certainly myself had these feelings, these fears, these beliefs come up before. And here's the good news. I've had these feelings come up, but I've still been able to raise my rates and bring my clients forward with me. Okay. So if any of these fears are rolling around for you, just know that you are in good company. Now, all that being said, whatever your fear or your worry is around raising your rates, around sharing about that with your clients, I want you to consider this very, very carefully. Really, take this in and see if this rings true for you. It is so important, whatever that fear or that worry is, for you to do your inner work on it so that you can shift that fear, that belief, that worry, because you don't want to go into that conversation with a client with the fear, with the worry, with the limiting belief. You want to do the inner work because you don't want to go into the conversation with a client while you're feeling scared that the client is going to be angry at you. You don't want to go into a conversation with your client feeling like your client is going to get insulted or judge you, etc. Remember, energy follows energy. And if you go into the conversation about raising your rates, feeling any of these things too much, then they're going to become part of the feel and the energy of the conversation, right? But if you go into that conversation with a different kind of energetics, with believing that you and your work are worthy of raising rates, with believing that it's possible your client might get upset, but that you and your business can withstand that and that your client can withstand that. If you go into these conversations with believing that if your client is meant to continue working with you, then the two of you together will find a way to make it work. And if you go into these conversations, maybe even believing that raising your rate is possibly of service to your client, because you're going to be modeling what it's like to actively value oneself for them as you raise your rates. Well, then the entire energy of the conversation is going to shift immediately. And with these new energetics, already you're in a much better position of yielding the outcome that you want from the conversation. Now, let me be clear. We're not talking about perfection here. So I'm not talking about completely eradicating the fear that your client might get angry at you, or I'm not talking about completely eradicating the fear that they're not going to get upset or judgmental or feel betrayed. Never, ever, ever, right? Do we want to apply perfection? Some of that might still be rolling around for you when you go into the conversation, and that is okay. But that being said, you do want to continually work on this to really shift from these fears. In Sacred Depths, and my graduates, you know this, we go deep into learning how we can shift and align our energetics as practitioners and as entrepreneurs. Our energetics are at the core of everything, of all of our client work, of all of our group work, of all of our marketing, of all of our business decisions. And to be able to shift our energetics, the very first baby step is to become aware of what the fears or the limiting beliefs are. So hopefully this conversation is starting to help with that. And for those of you that are my Sacred Depths graduates, if you want to go further, you can use any number of the tools that you've learned in Sacred Depths to go deeper with the fear or the belief behind the raising of the rates for you. You can use the befriend your fear technique with yourself on this. You can use the rewiring unhelpful thought patterns technique with yourself on this. You might want to use some resistance archetypes techniques or any of the myth of perfection techniques, whatever would apply best for you on this. Okay, so as we said, step one is to have aligned energetics for the conversation about the rate change with your client. And I'll toss this in because I think it's going to be helpful for your energetics. Also get clear on what are the beliefs that you want to be bringing into this conversation with your client. And then I'd write those beliefs down, the ones that you want to be bringing into the conversation, and review them right before you hop on the phone or the Zoom with your client. Okay, so from energetics, let's move on now to look a little bit at what to say to clients when you're raising your rates. And in order to be able to know what to say, how to lead that conversation, first we need to get clear on a couple of logistics. So first of all, if you are a practitioner that works session to session, and what I mean by that is that if you're a practitioner where your clients buy each session as they go along, so you're not selling packages, but you're selling session by session, please, please, if you are raising your rates, give your clients a good amount of advance notice on this. This is, in my opinion, part of the ethical piece. You don't want to tell them effective next week or next time we meet, I've raised my rates. I have even, and this is, unfortunately, this happens sometimes. I've been a client once or twice to a practitioner who, at the end of a session, they've told me that they've already raised their rates. So I went into a session thinking that I was going to pay X amount. I received the service. And then the practitioner told me, actually, no, it's higher than what I had expected. They had raised their rates and they didn't tell me until the end of the session. Now, I know that if you're listening to this podcast, probably you haven't done that, but it feels important to say, give people a good, at least 2 weeks, if not a month, so that they know, so that they can prepare. Right? That's number one. Number two, if you are not working session by session, but you're working in cycles or in packages, as I often do with my clients, obviously you're not going to raise your rate mid package. You're going to wait till the end of the package to raise the rate. Right? Even if you raise it for everybody else who's coming in new, if you have a contract with someone, you have a contract with someone. You're going to honor that. The other logistic piece is, how much are you raising your rates? Right? So you want to get clear on that. And I'll just share for myself. For me personally, I have never, and I feel pretty safe to say I will never drastically raise a rate on a continuing client. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I know of people that have kind of, overnight doubled and tripled rates. And I'm not going to say that that isn't ethical. I think that is ethical for some practitioners, but I just share transparently, for me, it has never felt aligned. And I bring this up because part of being ethical when you raise your rates is about raising them in a way that feels aligned for you. So I remember when I first became a coach and I was a baby entrepreneur, I knew nothing about entrepreneurship. I had a business coach who kind of pushed me into doubling my rates, and it didn't feel right. And it wasn't out of fear that it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right in my system. And, everybody, it was like, well, everybody in the industry is doing this and your rates are so much lower than everyone in the industries, and, so on and so forth is what I was told. And, I took her advice and I tried to double my rates, but when it came to actually speaking it to my clients, I didn't do it. That being said, at the time, I still named a number that didn't feel right for me. I'll tell you what happened. People didn't re-sign with me because I wasn't feeling aligned with it. It didn't feel right for me. So you want to think about, how much are you raising your rates? And is there a special rate within that raise for continuing clients? Now, you do not have to do this. This is not a have to, but I will share that for me, whenever I raise my rates, I always have a special rate for continuing clients. So I will raise my continuing clients rates, but not as high as for new people coming in. I really like to honor all of the ways that an individual has already invested in working with me. Okay. So those are some logistics that you want to be thinking about. When is the new rate going to be effective? When are you going to tell your client so that you give them enough time? And then how much are you raising? And is there a special rate within that for continuing clients? Once you're clear on the logistics, from there, you want to set up a conversation with your client about this. I really recommend that you don't just in an offhanded way mention it. If you are a practitioner that is session by session, again, people don't buy packages, you can just add on an extra 5 minutes to one of your sessions to share about it. But if you work as I do in packages, then you want to be a little more thoughtful and you want to set up a conversation about it. And you want that conversation to happen not at the very, very end of the package, but usually 2 sessions before the end of the package, around that time. In the Sacred Depths Transformational Practitioner Training, we actually spend a full module going over step by step the 45-minute next steps call that you want to set up and lead continuing clients through. And this is whether you're raising your rates or not, you do want to set up a call like that with your client. Having a next steps call is going to help the two of you honor and celebrate all of the work that you've done together. In that call, you're also going to, with your client, assess where your client is at, what they want next, what their next goals are, and what they might need in order to get there, right? The support that they might need in order to get there. And then from there in the conversation, you're going to share with your client about how you might do that, how you might help your client get to their next goals if the two of you were to continue to work together. There are a lot more details and nuances to that 45-minute next steps call, but that's the rough outline. And I cannot impress upon you enough how having a special conversation like this is going to set you up for the best possible outcome if you would like for a client to continue working with you into a next package. Now, where I want to hone in on in terms of this next steps conversation for today is the part where you share about raising your rates. So towards the end of that conversation, if you see that your client is excited, if you see that they really seem interested in learning more about how the two of you can continue your work together, You're going to ask them. You're actually going to ask them the question, are you interested in me giving you some more details of how this would look if we continued working together? And if they say yes, this is where you're going to mention raising your rates. Now, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I just really want to say it again. Don't just jump to talking about raising the rates. Take the 45 minutes to really have a call that's going to set you up for this, hitting some of the pieces that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Okay, so when you do get to this point in the call and your client says, yes, I do want to hear more about what that would look like if we were to continue, then you can say something as follows. And I'm just, making up some numbers here, but you would put your own numbers in. You can say something like this. I've raised my rates for 2024 to $250 a session. Or if you've got a package rate, tell them what the package rate is for the 3 months or the 6 months or the year, whatever it is. Now, after you share that you've raised your rates and what they are, if you want, this isn't necessary, but if you want, you can share with your client the reason. You can share with your client why you're raising your rates. You might say, because I haven't raised my rates in a few years and it's time. Or you can say, because I raise my rate every year for cost of living or whatever it is. Or you can say, because I've brought so many new techniques to the work over this last year. And because of that added value, it's time to raise the rates. Or you can say, because I'm in a new up-leveled place and it's time for my rates to reflect that. Or the reason might be because you are moving forward, you are going to be working with fewer clients, but giving them more of your attention, right? Or you don't have to give a reason at all, right? But I just put that in there for you because sometimes it makes sense to give a reason. A client can relate to that. They can resonate with it, and it helps them see that the why you're raising the rate, the value there. Sometimes I also will share transparently with my client that it wasn't an easy decision to make to raise my rates. I might say to them, I thought and felt a long while before deciding to raise my rates because I want to make it easy for everybody to continue. And what I ultimately really came to is that this is the right decision for me and for my business. It's what feels aligned. And I know in my heart that if it's aligned for me, then it's going to be aligned for the people who are meant to continue with me. Right. So I may add that in sometimes because it's the truth. Right. And I'll let them know I thought about it. I didn't come to this decision lightly. From there, here's what I will usually say next. Because you're one of my cherished existing clients, and because I really want to honor all of the work that we've done together and all of the ways that you've already invested in the work, for my continuing clients, you are going to receive a 10% discount. So instead of $250 a session for you, it's $225 a session. And I hope that this makes it easier for us to continue to work together, right? So I will share with them, because I do always give a continuing client discount. I will share with them that they are getting this special rate and why they're getting this special rate. Now, sometimes I'm going to share all of this verbally at the end of the next steps conversation. Other times, I may, if a client says, yes, I'm interested in learning more about how we can continue, I will say, great. I have new packages. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it all in writing and I'm going to send it to you via email. And then in the email, I will essentially share all the different pieces that I just shared now. And then either way, whether I do it voice to voice or over email, I am going to ask my client how it all sounds. Now, 9 times out of 10, if a client was going to continue working with me, if I wasn't going to raise my rates, right? If the rates were going to stay the same, 9 times out of 10, if a client was going to continue working with me, if I follow everything that I just shared with all of you on this episode, they will continue with me at the higher rate. Every now and again, 1 time out of 10, it might just be way too much of a financial stretch for a particular client. In which case, maybe I have a group program or a lower priced program that would be more appropriate for them moving forward. And every now and again, for that 1 out of 10, if I'm willing, I will offer maybe an extended payment plan, or we'll kind of rejig the sessions to look a little bit differently, but to match what their budget is. In other words, having this conversation in the ways that I've laid it out here today can open the door to strategizing with a client who can't pay the new rate, right? So the rejigging might look like instead of meeting 3 times a month, we meet twice a month, but at the old rate, right? Whatever it is. All right, one more energetic piece that I want to mention in all of this. Remember, in these conversations, as in all sales conversations, don't be attached to outcome. Now, when I say don't be attached to outcome, that doesn't mean that you don't want to make the sale. That doesn't mean that you don't want your client to continue. Of course it does. You really want your client to continue, right? But not being attached to outcome also means that you're not attaching a story about yourself or your value or the value of your work or the future success of your business or the future success of a client if that client chooses to not work with you, right? You're not attaching a story about your future or their future to the sale. When we're not attached to outcome, that's when we can show up fully present for the conversation about raising rates. And that's when we can be our awesome, wonderful, intuitive selves. And when we're not attached to outcome, that's when we don't come off as pushy, or we don't come off as upset if somebody says no. That's when we don't come off as desperate also. Okay, so to review, number one, energetics are everything, right? We always want to start with our energetics because energy follows energy. What are the beliefs that we are bringing into the conversation about raising rates? Number two, we want to pay attention to logistics and really make aligned decisions about what the new rates are going to be and when they're going to be effective. Step number three, we're going to set up that 45-minute next steps call. And then step number four, towards the end of that next steps call, we're going to share about the rate change. We're going to maybe share why we're raising our rates. We're going to share about that special continuing client rate if we have one. And then we're going to ask how it lands. Okay, my friends. I really, really hope that today's episode was valuable for you. I hope that it gives you more inspiration and courage to raise your rates and to share in empowering ways with your continuing clients about those change in rates. I hope maybe even it makes you see that these conversations can be fun and they don't have to be heavy. I also hope that this session has made you think a little bit more about how you want to present all of this to your clients and what kind of conversations you want to have as you invite your clients to continue to work with you. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a good rating, leave us a review. It is so appreciated. It is a way for you to support this podcast. It is a way to help me get the word out. It is also just a way for you to help fill my heart, knowing that this podcast is really making a difference in your life. And of course, as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with at least one friend. Until next time.